I didn't say a single word when she slid the divorce papers across the table. I just stared at the dates stamped at the top. She had filed them 3 days before she begged me to empty my life savings. I'm Mark. I'm 34 years old. I work as a civil engineer, building bridges, planning roads, creating foundations. I like things that are built to last. I've never been the flashy type. I drive a truck that's 10 years old. I live in a modest house, in a quiet suburb of Columbus. I believe in showing up, doing the work, and standing by the people you love. That's who I am. And that's exactly what I tried to be for Claire. Claire was 31. We met at a coffee shop 3 years ago. She was chaotic, always rushing, always stressed. But she had this laugh. It filled up the whole room. I was drawn to it. I wanted to be the calm to her storm. When we started dating, she told me about her past. It wasn't pretty. She had an ex-boyfriend named Ryan. Ryan was everything I wasn't. Unpredictable, reckless. He took all her money, wrecked her credit, and left her emotionally broken. I spent 3 years putting the pieces back together. I remember nights holding her while she cried, terrified of answering the phone because of debt collectors. I paid off her massive credit card balances. I helped her study for certifications so she could finally find a stable job. I gave her a safe place to land. And for a long time, it felt like we were building a real life, a solid foundation. Last month, her car finally gave out. It was a rusted sedan she bought back in college. The transmission died completely on the highway. She called me in tears, stranded on the shoulder of Interstate 71. I drove out and picked her up. I told her not to worry. I told her I'd handle it. And I did. I spent weeks searching for the right car. I didn't want her to ever have a car payment. I wanted her to be free of that financial anxiety. So, I pulled from my own savings. $15,000 in cash. It was a big chunk of my emergency fund. But she was my future. I bought a beautiful, low-mileage SUV. Safe. Reliable. Hers. I spent the entire afternoon washing and waxing it. I put a small blue ribbon on the steering wheel. And I parked it around the block, just down the street from our favorite restaurant. That was a Tuesday night. I invited her out to dinner. I told her we were celebrating a promotion at my firm. Just a small white lie, to get her dressed up and smiling for the surprise. When she walked into the restaurant, she looked beautiful, but her eyes were tired. She didn't have that bright laugh. She sat down across from me and barely touched her menu. I had the keys right in my jacket pocket. They felt heavy, heavy with a future I was so sure of. Every time I brushed my hand against my pocket, I smiled. I ordered us a bottle of wine. I poured her a glass. To us, I said. To the future. She didn't pick up her glass. She just stared at her hands. Her fingers were twisting her cloth napkin, over and over, twisting it into a tight knot. Mark, she started. Her voice was barely a whisper. You are the best man I've ever known. Whenever a sentence starts like that, you already know exactly how it ends. But my brain didn't want to accept it. Not tonight. Not with the keys resting in my pocket. You saved me, she said. You gave me a life again. And I love you for that. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but they weren't apologetic. They were resolute. But I don't think I'm in love with you. The restaurant around us disappeared. The chatter of the other tables, the clinking of silverware, it all just faded to static. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us. I watched a drop of condensation slide down the side of my water glass. I think we should just be friends, she whispered. She reached across the table and tried to touch my hand. I pulled it away, slowly, carefully. Why now? I asked. My voice was perfectly calm. Too calm. She looked down at her lap. Ryan called me yesterday. The name hit the table like a lead weight. Ryan. The guy who destroyed her. He's in a really bad place, Mark. She wiped a tear from her cheek. He has no one. He got evicted. She took a deep breath. He says he's finally ready to change. She looked at me like she expected me to understand. Like she expected me to give her my blessing. My ex needs me more. I sat perfectly still. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. My hand slipped into my jacket pocket. My fingers traced the cold metal of the car keys. The keys to the $15,000 gift. The keys to the safe, reliable future that she was throwing away for a ghost. I looked at her face. Really looked at her. And in that moment, the woman I spent 3 years saving became a total stranger. I felt the jagged metal grooves of the keys pressing hard into my palm. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. I slowly let go of the keys. My hand slipped out of my pocket. Empty. I looked at her across the table. Okay, I said. Just one word. Simple. Quiet. Final. Claire blinked. Her brow furrowed in confusion. She was waiting for a fight. She wanted me to beg. To plead for our 3 years together. Okay, she repeated. Her voice trembled a little. That's it. You're not angry. Would it change your mind? I asked. She looked down at her napkin. No, she whispered. I have to help him, Mark. He has no one else. I nodded slowly. Then there's nothing left to say. I raised my hand. The waiter brought the check. I paid for our uneaten dinner with a $100 bill. I stood up from the table. I want your things out of my house by Sunday, I said. My voice didn't shake. It was perfectly level. Claire gasped. Mark, please, she said. She reached out, trying to grab my sleeve. Don't do this. We can still be friends. She looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes. The same eyes that made me empty my savings account just hours ago. I still need you in my life, she cried. I looked down at her. Ryan needs you, I said. I don't. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. The cool night air hit my face. I walked around the corner and right past the beautiful, shiny SUV. The blue ribbon on the steering wheel looked like a cruel joke under the streetlights. I didn't stop. I walked 2 more blocks to my old truck. I got in, turned the key, and drove home. The next 3 days were a blur of cardboard boxes. Claire packed up her life. She cried constantly. She left apologetic notes on the kitchen counter. She tried to hug me in the hallway. I didn't react. I treated her like a tenant whose lease had expired. Polite, distant, cold. By Sunday night, she was gone. The house was painfully quiet. I spent the next week returning the SUV to the dealership. I took a small financial loss on the paperwork, but the bulk of my money was back in my account. Safe. Untouched. I thought it was over. I thought the cord was finally cut. But people like Claire, they don't know how to let go of a safety net. It was Thursday afternoon. I was at a construction site, reviewing blueprints. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Claire's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It stopped, and then immediately rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mark, she said. She was sobbing. Real panic in her voice. Mark, I'm so sorry to call you. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the hum of the machinery around me. It's my car, she cried. The mechanic finally finished looking at it. She took a ragged, shaky breath. The transmission is completely dead. It's $3,000 to fix. Silence. Mark, I don't have it, she whispered. Ryan needed my last paycheck for his back rent, so he wouldn't be homeless. Her voice cracked. I have no way to get to work. She paused, waiting for the old Mark to step in, waiting for the reliable guy to save the day. Can you please just loan me the money? She begged. I swear to God I'll pay you back. I stood there on the construction site. The wind was blowing dust around my boots. I listened to her crying through the speaker. It was the same helpless cry, the one she used when debt collectors called. The cry that used to break my heart. But right now, I felt absolutely nothing. I realized something in that moment. She had never loved me. She only loved what I could do for her. To her, I was just a bank account with a heartbeat. Claire, I said. My voice was perfectly steady. You left me for another man. And now you want me to pay, so you can drive to work. To support him? It's not like that, she sobbed. It's a loan, Mark. Just a loan. I know you have the money in your savings. You told me you were financially secure. Please, don't be cruel. There it was. The manipulation. If I didn't hand over my hard-earned money, I was the cruel one. Her decisions were somehow my responsibility. I'm not being cruel, I said. I'm just no longer your safety net. Call Ryan. He's your partner now. He doesn't have it, she screamed. Her sadness instantly turned to a sharp, bitter anger. You know he doesn't have it. Why are you punishing me for following my heart? I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain the reality of her choices. I just pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button on the screen. And then, I blocked her number. For a week, things were quiet. I focused on my job. I focused on rebuilding my peace. I started packing up the last few things that she had left behind in the garage. A box of winter coats. Some old college textbooks. I texted her sister, asking her to come pick the box up. But on Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the front door. It wasn't her sister. It was Claire. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her clothes looked rumpled and worn. Reality was clearly catching up to her. I came for the box, she muttered. She pushed past me into the house, like she still owned the place, like she hadn't completely shattered our life 2 weeks ago. I closed the door slowly. "It's in the kitchen," I said. She walked down the hallway. I stayed near the front door, giving her space to take her things and leave. But she didn't grab the cardboard box. She stopped dead in her tracks. She was staring at the kitchen island. At a stack of mail I had opened that morning. Sitting right on top was a thick envelope from the local dealership. It was the final cancellation paperwork. I watched her pick it up. Her eyes scanned the bold print, the vehicle make, the model, the purchase price, $15,000, paid in full. And then she saw the date of the purchase. It was a Tuesday, the exact same day. She broke my heart at the restaurant. She slowly turned around to face me. The paper was shaking violently in her hand. Her face was completely pale. She stared at the paper. Her eyes darted from the total amount to the make and model and back to the date. "Mark," she whispered. Her voice was hollow, empty. "Is this?" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "It was," I said calmly. "It was parked around the corner from the restaurant. The night you left." She dropped the paper back onto the kitchen island, like it had burned her fingers. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. Not the manipulative tears from the phone call. These were real. This was the raw, heavy grief of realizing exactly what you just threw away. "You bought me a car," she choked out. "Cash. No payments. Just for you." I replied. I didn't say it to be cruel. I just stated it as a matter of historical fact. She covered her mouth with both hands. A loud, ugly sob escaped her throat. She stumbled backward until she hit the hallway wall. "I didn't know," she cried. "Mark, I swear I didn't know you did that." She looked up at me, desperate. "If I had known." I held up my hand. That was the phrase that finally broke my silence. "If you had known what, Claire?" I asked. My voice was harder now, colder. "If you had known about the car, you would have stayed? You would have pretended to love me, just to keep the keys?" She shook her head violently. No, that's not what I mean." But we both knew it was the truth. The mask had completely slipped. She didn't regret breaking my heart. She regretted losing her prize. She regretted betting on the wrong horse. "Get your box, Claire," I said. I pointed down the hallway. "Take your things and leave." She didn't move toward the box. Instead, she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, crying into her knees. "Ryan is awful," she sobbed into the quiet house. "He took the rent money and spent it at a casino. He yelled at me when I asked for it back. He told me to get out." She looked up at me. Her face was streaked with black mascara. "I made a mistake, Mark. I made a terrible, stupid mistake. Please, let me come home." I looked down at her, the woman I used to think I would marry, sitting on my hardwood floor, begging for a do-over. Not because she missed me, but because her other option didn't pan out. I walked over to the front door. I opened it wide. The afternoon sun spilled into the entryway. "You don't live here anymore," I said. She slowly got up. She walked past the kitchen, completely ignoring the box of her winter coats. She stopped in the doorway, inches from my face. "You're really going to throw 3 years away?" she whispered. "Over one mistake?" I didn't blink. "You threw it away on a Tuesday," I said. She stared at me for a long second. Then, she turned and walked out. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. I thought that was the absolute end of it. I thought the book was finally closed. But 2 nights later, I heard a loud, shattering crash out in my driveway. I jumped out of bed, walked to the window, and pulled back the blinds. And what I saw under the streetlights made my blood run cold. There, under the harsh yellow glow of the streetlight, was my 10-year-old truck. The windshield was completely caved in, webbed with deep, jagged cracks. Standing next to the hood was a man I had never met, but I knew exactly who he was. Ryan. He had a heavy metal tire iron in his hand. He was breathing hard, raising it above his head, ready to bring it down again. And standing on the sidewalk behind him was Claire. She was pulling at her own hair, screaming at him to stop, screaming that he was making it worse. But Ryan just laughed. He swung the iron down hard, shattering the driver's side window into 1,000 pieces. Any other man might have grabbed a baseball bat. Any other man might have run outside screaming. But I am a civil engineer. I look at structures. I look at causes and effects. And right now, I was watching a doomed structure finally collapse. I didn't turn on the porch light. I just picked up my phone. I pressed record. I captured the swings, the shattered glass, the screaming. And then, I dialed 911. I have an active vandalism in my driveway, I said calmly. I gave the dispatcher my address. The suspect is armed with a tire iron. The police station is only 2 miles from my house. It took them exactly 4 minutes to arrive. The flashing red and blue lights painted the neighborhood in sudden, violent color. Ryan dropped the tire iron immediately. He tried to run down the alleyway, but 2 officers tackled him into the damp grass. I finally unlocked my front door. I stepped out onto the porch. The cool night air smelled like ozone and broken safety glass. An officer was already placing handcuffs on Ryan. The metallic clicks echoed in the quiet street. Claire was standing by the curb. She was shaking uncontrollably, her arms wrapped tightly around her own chest. Another officer walked up my driveway. He had a notepad in his hand. "Is this your vehicle, sir?" he asked. "It is," I replied. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked past the officer. I looked right at Claire. Her eyes were wide, terrified, pleading. She silently mouthed the word, "Please." She wanted me to save her. One last time. To make the mess go away. To pay the toll for her mistakes. I turned my attention back to the officer. "Yes," I said. "Felony property damage. I have the whole thing on video." Claire let out a loud, agonizing wail. She watched as they shoved Ryan into the back of the cruiser. The heavy door slammed shut. And just like that, her great romance was over. The officers took my statement. They towed Ryan's rusted car away. And eventually, the flashing lights disappeared into the night. Claire was left standing alone at the end of my driveway. No car. No boyfriend. No safety net. "Mark," she whispered into the dark. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at the shattered glass glittering on my concrete driveway. "I don't know, Claire," I said. "But you can't stay here." I walked back inside. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned against the heavy wood and listened to the silence. My truck was ruined. It would take a few weeks to fix. But as I stood there in the quiet hallway of my home, I didn't feel angry. I felt incredibly light. I build foundations for a living. I know that sometimes you have to clear away the wreckage. You have to sweep up the broken glass before you can finally start building something real. And tomorrow morning, that's exactly what I'm going to do.